Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 138 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host Christian, and I'm joined by our co-host Brad.
Hello everybody.
Before we got too far into this episode, I just want to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you would like to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Common Knowledge YouTube channel, and check out our Patreon. With that out of the way, let's get on with the podcast for the week.
Woohoo! How are you, dude? It's been a while.
It has been a while. I am tired, man.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've had a long week at work, and you look like you've also had a long week at work based on the current state of where you are.
Yeah, I'm in beautiful downtown St. Joseph, Missouri, about 6 hours from my actual home. Maybe not 6, probably like 5 hours. Just north of Kansas City here, which is the complete opposite side of the state of where I normally am. But it's okay. You gotta do what you gotta do for work. I'm only here tonight, and then I'll be out in this area all day tomorrow, and then I'm heading back home.
Now, is it a drive for you? Or, I'm not sure. I assume, like, you drive yourself as opposed to, like, heading back with the entire team.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I'm dealing with not just what they do every day, but, like, phone calls and emails and stuff that they, frankly, shouldn't be privy to, I guess, or shouldn't hear about necessarily. So yeah, I have my own like company work truck and stuff that I'll drive back and forth.
Okay, gotcha. That's I don't know. Whenever you're alone, those drives, I know for me, always seem longer. So
yeah, I got to make sure I got the podcast list fired up and a bunch of stuff ready to go. So the drives lately have been a little longer. I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but I had some problems with my phone, my iPhone 7, my ancient iPhone 7. It was going through a software update, and it pretty much crashed in the middle of it, and I had to restore it back to my last backup date, my last backup time, which was November of 2019. So I essentially lost like the last 18 months of anything that's been on my phone. So all my music, my screenshots, my notes, I started my Pauper B Twitter account for Pauper in February of 2020, so everything from last year from Twitter is just gone. Like, I lost it all. So I've been dealing with that, and there's a lot of work stuff on there that I lost. Like, I should have backed it up. At some point, I guess I turned off the automatic backup or whatever. I don't remember doing that, but I guess I did. And now I have learned my lesson.
That's rough, man. But I don't know. I guess if there's a silver lining, at least you got some of it back instead of none of it.
Yeah, I did get some of it back. Thankfully, in the last few months, I just now started a spreadsheet, with like all my passwords and usernames for all the various stuff I do. Because now that my phone had to restore, I had to re-update or reinstall all these apps that I've been using, and I never would have remembered 30 different passwords or whatever it is. So that was annoying. That was like 4 straight days of frustration and trying to find stuff. Even people I work with, they got hired in the last year. I had no contact information for them, no email, like just nothing. They were just gone.
Somebody calls you and you're like, hello?
Yeah. Who is this?
Exactly.
Yeah. Pretty great.
Yeah. Well, has anything been going on in your Magic life?
Magic life, not so much. This is the time of year where we're real busy at work. I know I've said that before, but this is like, there's even a nickname for it around the office. They call it Rocktober. So we're coming into a Rocktober, which I completely hate, but that's what they call it. So we've been ramping up there. I've been on the road a little bit more. Even when I'm not staying out of town, I'm still, I think 3 days last week, I was about 3 hours from the house. So that's, 6 hours right there in the truck outside of work in the field. So by the time I get home, I'm just sort of spent. And with the former current state of the meta and whatnot, I just haven't really focused too much on Magic. And school's starting up, and it's the whole dad stuff. August, September is usually a little rough for the hobbies.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to hear the origin story of Rocktober sometime. But
I think it started before I even... September 1st was my 12th year at the company, and I think it started before I was there. So I think it started with the former owner.
Gotcha.
So it's just a big vocal meme around the office.
Yeah, no, man. For me, given the news that we're about to go over, I haven't been doing too much, but I do plan on testing White-Red Wildfire, which is just going to be like a White-Red Monarch build, but, playing Cleansing Wildfire with the Indestructible Lands.
Yeah, sure. Is this a deck you've seen, or is it just something you've been theorizing about, or...
It's a deck that I had seen, just sometimes on like the 5.0 deck dumps or people playing it or whatever, but it seems like now that Affinity got hit a little bit and Storm appears to have been killed, at least the Chatterstorm decks.
Right.
The deck actually has a little bit more play because I expect big control, meaning Tron, to come back a little bit. And so the fact that you get to main deck this like anti-Tron card that also advances your main game plan seems really good.
And we've had, what was that, Geomancer's Gambit? I think that one for a while.
Yeah.
It's only seen play recently because people want copies 5 through 8 of Cleansing Wildfire. But yeah, you're right. If you can at times hurt your opponent or at times help your deck with a single card, that's pretty excellent. I did want to talk about this, though. I know we'll do our spoiler episode here in a week or two whenever all the new Innistrad cards are out. And I may be jumping topics here, but I wanted to give a little shout out. This is not a Pauper card. It probably never will be a Pauper card, but it is presently, my favorite Magic card that has ever been printed, not named Seeker of the Way. Just wanted to give a little shout out to Thomas Brown Hewitt, a.k.a. Leatherface, a.k.a. Flesh Taker. Have you seen this card yet?
Yeah, I absolutely have. I, much like you, I'm in love.
It's absolutely amazing. Every single bit about it. I don't know if you folks out there have seen it, but that's the actual title of the card is Flesh Taker. It's a 2/2 human assassin, much like Leatherface, for a black and a white, the best color combination in the game. And whenever you sacrifice another creature, you gain a life and scry one. But you can also pay a generic, sacrifice a creature, and Flesh Taker gets +2/+2 until the end of turn. Everything about that is fantastic, and I love it. The art's amazing. He's got like this bloody butcher apron on. He's holding this gigantic cleaver with this bull horn head mask thing. It's just totally creepy and totally awesome.
Yeah, man, I love the art and all the flavor on this card. This might be the first like truly scary Magic card I ever remember seeing.
Yeah, it's like horror incarnate on a Magic card finally. Like, they've always done horror, but this is actual, like, scare you horror.
I agree. Yeah, no, that card is sick. It's going to be a great PDH commander.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, can't wait to brew with it.
But anyways, do you want to go ahead and get into the big news?
Yeah, we'll get into our main topic here, which we've already touched on. I think people can kind of guess what it is, but there was finally, about 8 to 9 weeks later, after MH2 came out, there was finally a ban and restricted announcement only focused on Pauper today. So I thought we'd just kind of go through it. It's a pretty short article, 4 or 5 paragraphs. We'll just kind of read through it, talk about it. The main gist of it is Chatterstorm, the card, and Sojourner's Companion. Those were the only 2 bans. But we'll kind of read through a little bit of their reasoning and just sort of see what we think about it, see where the meta's going to go, where the format's going to go afterwards. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
I'll probably skip that first paragraph because it's just sort of an introduction to what he's talking about. Mr. Ian Duke. But he goes on to say that in recent weeks, Storm combo decks have had the highest non-mirror match win rate among top decks and earned by far the most 5-0 performances in Magic Online leagues. These decks used fast mana to power out a large Chatterstorm, often in combination with First Day of Class, to create an insurmountable board state or even win the game on the spot. Bingo. Given the limitations of the Pauper card pool, many decks struggle to interact with this win condition. Therefore, to address Storm's high win rate, high metagame share, and difficulty to interact with, we are banning Chatterstorm. What do you think, Mr. Christian?
I'm obviously very pro banning Chatterstorm. I think this is really good. Not touching any other cards is something that I think I really like. I think you can make an argument for just every card with the keyword storm printed on it. For me, I probably would have been also fine if they would have banned Galvanic Relay and Weather the Storm, but Chatterstorm seems like a fine start.
Yep, sure.
Storm mechanic is way, way too good for Pauper, and I'm glad that this card is gone.
It's called a storm scale for a reason. I don't know if you've ever, or if anybody out there has ever heard of the storm scale, but look it up. It's basically Morrow made this scale of 1 to 10 of cards they'll never reprint, and they named it the storm scale because that's a mechanic that they probably should have never developed to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. You summed it up well.
Next, Ian goes on to say, we considered banning Galvanic Relay as well, but our hope is to allow players to experiment with slower, lower-powered versions of the deck. Additionally, we've seen this card being used in other contexts, where it is more about generating value than winning the game on the spot. I don't know. I haven't played a ton of MTGO lately, but I don't know that I've ever seen a deck outside of Chatterstorm use Galvanic Relay. Was that incorrect?
I don't know. I think that there are obviously going to be other Storm decks that utilize Galvanic Relay now that Chatterstorm is banned. I think it's fine to leave it around, because hopefully there is a Storm deck that is too slow. Or not too slow, but a lot slower. Thinking maybe
easier to interact with, maybe.
Thinking maybe like Cycling Storm, like a different version of that plays Galvanic Relay. I think that'll be fine. As for the other decks using Galvanic Relay, I am not aware of them, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist, and I'm sure there will be plenty of decks that utilize Galvanic Relay as a value engine now.
Yep. The way I took this little blurb here is Wizards really loves this card. They don't want to ban it. They want people to use it and brew with it and play with it, and I'm okay with that. It's a fun card. I mean, on its own, on its face value, it's fair, I guess. We'll just have to see if someone breaks it, I guess. All right. After that, the next paragraph, Affinity has been a slightly different case in that from a pure win rate perspective, the metagame seemed to adapt successfully, with the most popular Grixis Affinity variant settling in at just under 50% non-mirror match win rate. That said, while Affinity was being kept in check by a small number of top decks, its win rate against many of the less represented decks was high. To open the metagame to more diversity, we're choosing to ban Sojourner's Companion. We considered other options such as ATOG or Disciple of the Vault, but opted to preserve the unique gameplay style of that deck. Banning Sojourner's Companion should lower the consistency and win rate of the deck without fundamentally changing the way it plays. I know there was quite a bit of disappointment with this particular paragraph online, at least.
I agree that it will lower the consistency and win rate of the deck without fundamentally changing the way it plays. I don't know how much it's going to lower the consistency, just because, you have Gearseeker Serpent, you have Carapace Forger, you have some other really good beatdown options that the deck can play. And with Disciple of the Vault, already being in the deck, the deck already attacks on a lot of different angles. So I think Affinity will still be a very strong deck. That being said, I'm hoping now that Chatterstorm is out, some of the decks that are good against Affinity, but that were terrible against Chatterstorm, will get to rise a little bit. So I'm thinking about pretty much every white deck that can play the Dust to Dust in their sideboard and, play a lot of Affinity hate, but couldn't necessarily hate out Chatterstorm, can now focus more on Affinity. Obviously, Blue-Black Delver is already pretty good against Affinity, so I'm excited for that deck. Really, again, excited for a lot of the different brews to come into fruition, because I think there are a lot of decks that could beat Affinity, and I believe that. I just think the combination of Affinity and Storm in the metagame meant that the decks that could have been good against Affinity could never actually rise to the top of the metagame. So this seems like a fine ban to me. When we were talking about it in the Discord, I said that I could see Sojourner's Companion, a Tog, or the Indestructible Lands. If it were up to me, I would have just preferred to see all the Indestructible Lands go, because I really like the fact that Affinity had a sideboard card that, the deck was very, very strong, but there was a sideboard card that could just beat it, which was Gorilla Shaman. And now that that's a little bit less likely to happen, it makes it to where some of the decks that I personally like to play have a harder time hating out Affinity, such as Burn and Blue-Red Fairies.
Sure, Affinity's consistency has probably knocked down a few pegs. I don't think it's going to do much to make it less powerful, necessarily. Like you said, there's still, we could go back to the Frogmite well or the Carapace Forger well, but we still got the Enforcer, and we still, the dual lands are still legal. And those are really, I don't want to say those are the problem, but those are really what gives that deck sort of its oomph. Are those indestructible lands? Because like you said, any deck that he could produce 1 red mana, here you go, here's Gorilla Shaman, turn 2, and I just beat Affinity. But now that's just not a thing anymore.
I don't know. I'm excited to see what the changes bring. I do also like in the next paragraph, just to kind of paraphrase it, they basically say that they're aware that some players voice other potential metagames concern that could result from these 2 decks being kind of weakened. But they also said that because Pauper is so unique, that they were going to wait and see. And it sounds like they are going to be a little bit more on the front foot if the metagame remains unhealthy to do something about decks like Affinity or decks that could come back into the limelight like Tron or what have you. And because of that, I think this announcement leaves me feeling very positive about the state of the format.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like they're, at least they put it into words, that they're going to basically pay more attention to the metagame and see how these 2 bans sort of shape up the meta and the format going forward. But we'll actually see how closely they stick to that, I guess. I feel like we've heard that before, but we'll see. And yeah, there was a lot of players crying for different cards to be banned, different this and that. We don't have to go down that road, but a lot of those were calls to be banned based on the meta with Storm and Affinity in it. So we'll see. We'll see what comes of it the next few weeks. But yeah, I'm pretty positive. I would have liked to seen maybe Ephemerate go, maybe Ghostly Flicker hit the road, but we can't have everything, I guess.
And something else that I think is important to do, whenever you see a ban, looking at what got banned is really good, but to figure out where to go in a metagame, you should look at what didn't get banned. So that's what I plan on doing over the next week. There's a lot of decks that didn't get touched and probably actually got stronger because of this. The Delver decks seem like they're really well positioned. Tron seems like it could really make a comeback now that Storm, which was, a deck that could really get underneath Tron, is gone. I think Affinity is still going to be really strong because they didn't go super hard against that deck. Monarch should be really good, usually. Metagame shift, Boggles. I don't know. I think there's a lot of decks that can be played, but generally looking at what didn't get banned and thinking, what does that mean for the format? I think these indestructible dual lands are going to have a lot more time to shine now that, we sort of feel like they are safe in the format. I think that means that, any deck playing Cleansing Wildfire is going to have a leg up on the metagame, and Affinity will continue to have a leg up on the metagame as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's a pretty good way to put it. It almost feels, I know Affinity is still going to be a strong deck, but it almost feels, or maybe I'm just hoping, but it almost feels like we're going back to the meta before Modern Horizons 2 was printed. Kind of, sort of. In that we'll have, like you said, we'll have a handful of control decks back in the format. I don't know if this ban really opens up the world to be brewer friendly like it was 8 months ago, 10 months ago, what have you, but we'll just have to see where that goes. But I do like that, we kept the dual lands legal for brewing purposes, because like you said, there is a lot of stuff you can do with them. They're very versatile, and I think they'll have a chance to shine, as you said.
Something that I really wonder from the brewer's perspective is there was this kind of brew around me shell before Modern Horizons 2 in Cascade decks. I'm really interested to see where that goes, because I think what could happen is here, week 1 of this metagame, that could really pop off in the challenges and stuff. And you'll see every mainstream deck adopt these indestructible lands, I think. And that'll kind of change how those decks are built, maybe from, they go away from land destruction, which is what I think they initially will be, to something more mid-range value pile. So I expect, I would look at like week 2 of the metagame to be like primary brewing paradise, where those Cascade shells really have to figure out something else to do.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, for a long time, it was pretty much the Cascade decks that pushed Tron out. kept Tron at least at bay for a while. I don't know if those Jund decks of the world or those Rakdos Cascade decks are going to make a soaring comeback or anything, but I do think that that's a strategy that, like you said, can definitely be revisited in the next couple weeks with a new angle, new twist, new curves, new, that sort of thing. And I'm all about that. I love the Cascade decks. Once Modern Horizons 2 hit online, they pretty much went away. Like, I never saw them in the practice room. I don't think many of them showed up in the deck dumps. Certainly, maybe just a handful in the challenges and that sort of thing. But I'd be excited if those came back.
Yeah, me too. I think one of the things is if the metagame slows down a fair bit, you'll see the kind of like slow Jund removal and really good creatures builds come back. And that would really excite me, I think, if something like that were to happen. You could also see, like, just something that, like, theorizing my mind a little bit is, like, Jund Indestructible Lands with Cleansing Wildfire, Arbor Elf, Serap's Packmate, yeah, and, removal and Cascade creatures. And it's like, oh man, like, you just have a deck that has all of the fun stuff to do in Pauper and all of the good stuff to do in Pauper right there jammed into one valuable deck.
Yep.
So that could be something that exists, but I don't know. I'm really excited for the metagame. Like I said, I plan on testing out white-red decks first, and then after that, maybe trying to see what the Cascade decks and Fairies decks have going on.
Yeah, I think I was going to probably hop on the Scred train here shortly, and then probably look back into... If I have time for such a grindy deck, I may play like a Pestilence, like an Orzhov Pestilence deck. I think that could be kind of good right now. But then on the brewing side of me, it's not even really a brew because it did have some success. I want to get back into playing either blue-black or blue-red Serpentine Curve. I think that deck, the meta is going to go the way we're talking about, where the game's going to last a little longer, a little grindier, a little more control-y. I think those decks could be at least tier 2 again, steal a 5-0 every now and then, that sort of thing.
Those decks could be good. I think you already mentioned Pestilence. I think that those decks could be a real contender, and especially in like challenge meta games that just happen to be, just right. But I also think, there's going to be some decks that kind of come out of nowhere from all this, from Modern Horizons 2 cards that maybe we didn't get to brew with really because there were really strong decks. That's something that we should also always be considering, is that I could literally go to bed tomorrow and this entire podcast could be worthless because somebody found like the next 3 best decks in Pauper.
Yep, absolutely. That kind of reminds me of when Modern Horizons 1 came out. It wasn't until after Astrolabe got banned that really people started using the blade back sliver or whatever, the Hellbent sliver in slivers. So that had a chance to shine, kind of like what you were saying. Once you get rid of the broken cards or the cards that are too strong, people start digging through the chaff of the rest of the set, and that's when you really find those gems, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about this week as far as the banned and restricted announcement goes. I'm really excited to play Pauper. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I definitely am. I'm excited for work to slow down and for Pauper to pick up, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I guess it's going to do it for this episode of Common Knowledge. If you wanted to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JustGuyDad. Brad, where can they find you? At
Pauper_B on Twitter, or BradDrackV on MTGO.
Or if you have any questions on the Pauper format, MTGO, or anything else, you can also shoot us an email over at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. Thanks again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism Network for letting us be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for listening. Take very good care of each other.
And never stop banning squirrels.